Alright, we're back with another batch of Guardians cards. Before we jump into this next group, let me say thank you to those that leave comments on these videos with your opinions on these cards. I find them really interesting and insightful, and a lot of times you guys say stuff that I'd never even thought of, which in turn makes me better at this whole process of evaluating cards based on the current meta. So you guys keep up the good work, and let's take a look at these cards. First up, we've got Daisy Ridley. We know of two of her rarities. We know of the common and the uncommon version. Both of those are 3-cost shield characters with the shield affiliation. She's got an 0-1-1, a 1-2-2, 1-2-3 stat line, and her common says Aftershock. Deal 2 damage to all other character dice. So Aftershock was a keyword introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man set that means when this character leaves the field zone because of your opponent, i.e. damage from their characters or actions getting KO'd, being removed from the game, sent to the use pile, or reserve pool, you must use the Aftershock effect. And the key point here is that your opponent has to cause it to leave the field. You can't do something to trigger this Aftershock effect outside of causing your character to block something that KOs. Has to be damage from your opponent, has to be forced out of the field by your opponent into some other zone. So with that being said, she makes a good blocker, and she also makes a good soft counter to Batman Always Prepared that makes you re-roll all of your villain or non-villain dice on the field. When her Aftershock ability goes off, it deals 2 damage to both their side of the field and your side of the field, every character that's on the field in either player's field zone, which means it will take out your own sidekicks, but assuming you're blocking, then those sidekicks are probably doing some blocking themselves as well, and so it doesn't really make any difference to you unless you've got one of these pieces that I'm about to talk about. So what are some common things that you can KO with 2 damage from Daisy Ridley? Well, you can KO Shriek on 2 of her sides, you can KO Multiple Man on 2 of his sides, you can KO Guy Gardner on 2 of his sides, you can KO Dwarf Wizard on only 1 of his sides, and there's a smattering of low drops that people run in competitive teams that you can also KO, stuff like Miri. In addition to those, this also just wipes out sidekick walls, which is pretty cool. And the nice thing about this Aftershock effect is it just sits out there and taunts your opponent, because unless they wipe the card text on this card, then the trigger is going to go off at some point. So they now have to play around the threat of 2 damage constantly. I think this card is great in both draft and constructed, and the more that I do these card reviews, the more I see these potentials within the constructed meta of countering some aggro teams. So I think this does a good job of countering aggro teams in the competitive scene. The uncommon version says when Daisy Johnson attacks, you may pay up to 3 shields, and for each shield that you pay, Daisy Johnson deals 1 damage to all other character dice. This card is super cool because it gives you the flexibility to ping the board for as much or as little damage as you want, up to 3 of course. Now this is a win attacks ability, which means you can use it per attacking die, but things get a little weird because I'm not sure if you pay 1 shield, deal 1 damage, pay another shield, deal 1 damage, pay another shield, deal 1 damage, or if you pay 3 shields and deal 3 damage at once. Because you have 2 of them and you'd be paying shields for each of them, you would end up KOing 1 of them because it deals it to the other dice and 1 would stay around, so there's some murkiness that I haven't exactly thought through. But in the off chance that you can somehow deal 6 damage when you attack to the entire board, this card is crazy. I doubt that's actually the possibility, but even just dealing 3 to a board, or 2 to a board, or 1 to a board whenever you want via paying a shield is really cool. It's kind of like a more balanced Hulk Green Goliath if you remember that card all the way from AVX days. I like this card as a board clear in draft, and I like this card as a board clear in constructed. So I think both of these variants see play in both to varying degrees. Now let's talk about a very popular Guardian. This is Drax. Drax, we know of his common and uncommon version, and both of those are also 3-cost shield characters. These have the Guardians affiliation, obviously. He's got that amazing 1-2-4, 2-3-5, 2-4-6 stat line, very similar to his original incarnation, except they took that top side fielding cost and bumped it down to a 2. His common version says while you have a different active Guardian character die, you may field Drax for free. So as long as you're running another Guardian and they are currently out on the field when you roll up Drax on a character face, then you're putting out a 2-4, a 3-5, or a 4-6 and paying nothing. That's really, really strong. There are several other good Guardians to pair with this, and while I'm not quite sure that they can make a Guardian team viable in constructed, I think Guardians are super viable in draft in this set, which is good because this set is for them, right? It would be lame if you couldn't really draft a good Guardians team. As for this card, I find it very draftable, and I think you should definitely build around it if given the opportunity. And if Guardians do become viable in the meta, I think this card makes that team. Drax's uncommon version says while Drax is active, once per turn, if another character die is KO'd, Drax gets +3 attack. So let's just say that you KO one of your sidekicks during your turn, and you're giving Drax either a 5-4 stat line, a 6-5 stat line, or a 7-6 stat line, and you paid 3 to get Drax out there. There's also some immediate synergy with the uncommon Daisy ability. If you run both of these together and you have a sidekick out on the field, when Daisy attacks, you can ping off one of your sidekicks using the pay the shield thing on her card, thus buffing up Drax to insane levels, as I just mentioned. And this is a draft and constructed combo, and you can also add Overcrush in both of those formats via some basic actions. So this is a pretty strong card as well. Very good offering so far from these two characters. I'd say both the common and uncommon versions of this card are worth picking up in draft and are worth playing around with in constructed on a Guardians team. Here we have Dum Dum Dugan, both his common and uncommon version. Both of those are 2-cost shield characters. Man, we got a lot of shield characters in this episode. Dum Dum Dugan's stat line is an 022, 132, 133, and his common version says when Dum Dum Dugan would be KO'd, you may KO a sidekick in your field zone instead and clear all damage from Dum Dum Dugan. I like this card. It's not some world-changing ability. It's not going to completely redefine everything that we ever do, but it does provide you more options when blocking, and it makes things a little nicer for you when attacking. As long as you have a sidekick in the field zone, this card could block or attack into anything with very little repercussions. I could easily see this card KOing something with its 3/3 stat line and then not getting KO'd itself because you just pop a sidekick over in the KO instead, and getting little bits of value like that multiple times throughout a game. Oh, I forgot to mention this has the shield affiliation, so there's that, but there's not a lot in constructed that you can really do with that. Overall, I see this being a better draft card than a constructed card, but if you find a spot for it in constructed, be my guest because the ability is pretty cool. The uncommon version of Dum Dum Dugan says Dum Dum Dugan gets +1 attack for each of your sidekick dice in the field zone. So how many sidekicks in the field do you need before this becomes game breaking, before this becomes really, really powerful? Well, if you have 2 sidekicks in the field, then you've got a 4/2, a 5/2, and a 5/3. If you have 3 sidekicks in the field zone, then you now have a 5/2, a 6/2, and a 6/3. Oh, and just a reminder, this card cost 2. For competitive teams that like to push with a lot of sidekicks, rolling those sidekicks out, getting them, and then attacking with them, this card is awesome. In draft, where you're more likely to see sidekick walls and getting sidekicks out of your bag, all of a sudden you have a low drop character that can deal a ton of damage. This card has a ton of potential, especially in draft. If you see this in draft and you can get a few of them, I would pick them up just about every time. A highly statted guy for 2 in draft is so strong. Alright, so after this episode, we are a third of the way through the set that has been spoiled so far. Let me know what you think about these 3 characters. I liked all of these characters. Tell me which of these you think are most powerful or have the most potential. I'm going to keep pumping these things out as the set is approaching quicker and quicker, so I got to get these things done. My hope is to be able to get through the entire set before it launches at the beginning of next month. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching.